How the atomic bomb changed the world forever. On August 6, 1945, at exactly 8:15 in the morning, a single American B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay released one weapon over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Within seconds, over 70,000 people were dead. Within months, that number would climb past 140,000. And within years, the entire political, military, and moral architecture of human civilization would be fundamentally, irrevocably transformed. This is not simply a story about one weapon. This is the story of how humanity crossed a threshold it could never uncross, and how every single day since that August morning, the entire world has lived in the shadow of what was unleashed. To understand what the atomic bomb changed, we first need to understand what the world looked like before it. For thousands of years, warfare followed a recognizable pattern. Armies fought armies. Cities fell to siege and fire. Empires rose and collapsed through conventional military force. Even the most devastating weapons before 1945, artillery, firebombing campaigns, chemical weapons, required massive quantities, sustained effort, and enormous manpower to produce catastrophic results. The destruction of Dresden in February 1945, for example, required over 1,200 Allied aircraft flying multiple sorties to kill somewhere between 22,000 and 25,000 people. That was considered one of the most devastating conventional bombing raids in history. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima was delivered by a single aircraft carrying a single weapon weighing roughly 9,700 pounds. The contrast is almost incomprehensible. One plane. One bomb. One city effectively erased from existence in under a minute. The weapon itself was the product of the Manhattan Project, a scientific and industrial undertaking of staggering scale. Launched in 1942 under the directive of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the project employed over 130,000 people at its peak and cost approximately $2 billion, equivalent to roughly $28 billion in today's money. Scientists from across the Allied world, including refugees who had fled Nazi persecution in Europe, gathered at secret facilities in Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford. Under the scientific direction of J. Robert Oppenheimer, they solved one of the most complex engineering challenges in human history, harnessing the energy released by nuclear fission, the splitting of uranium or plutonium atoms, into a deliverable explosive device. When the first test bomb, nicknamed Trinity, detonated in the New Mexico desert on July 16, 1945, Oppenheimer famously recalled the words of Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." He was not being dramatic. He understood, perhaps better than anyone alive, exactly what had just been born. 3 weeks after Trinity, Hiroshima was destroyed. 3 days after that, on August 9, a second bomb nicknamed Fat Man obliterated Nagasaki, killing an estimated 40,000 people instantly, with total deaths eventually reaching 80,000 or more. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, was over. And the nuclear age had officially begun. The immediate geopolitical consequence was enormous. The United States emerged from World War II as the world's only nuclear power, and that monopoly granted it an unprecedented degree of global dominance. But that monopoly lasted only 4 years. The Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb in August 1949, far earlier than American intelligence had predicted, partly because Soviet spy networks had successfully penetrated the Manhattan Project itself. Scientists like Klaus Fuchs had passed critical technical information to Moscow, accelerating the Soviet program by years. And just like that, the fundamental nature of international conflict was permanently altered. Two superpowers now faced each other across an ideological divide, each possessing the capacity to annihilate the other, and potentially all of civilization along with it. This standoff gave birth to one of the strangest strategic doctrines in human history, mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The logic was brutally simple. If both sides knew that launching a nuclear attack would guarantee their own total destruction in return, then neither side would ever launch. Nuclear weapons, paradoxically, became tools of peace through the absolute certainty of mutual annihilation. During the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union each built arsenals containing thousands of nuclear warheads. At the peak in the 1980s, the combined global stockpile exceeded 60,000 nuclear weapons. The world was, quite literally, armed enough to destroy itself many times over. The Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962 brought humanity closer to nuclear war than at any other point in history. For 13 days, President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev engaged in a tense standoff after American reconnaissance aircraft discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from the Florida coast. On October 27, later called Black Saturday, a series of simultaneous miscommunications and near accidents nearly triggered a full nuclear exchange. U-2 spy planes strayed into Soviet airspace. American destroyers dropped depth charges on a Soviet submarine, a submarine whose captain, Vasily Arkhipov, had to be personally talked out of launching a nuclear-tipped torpedo in retaliation. Arkhipov's calm decision likely saved hundreds of millions of lives. The crisis was resolved diplomatically, but it revealed just how razor-thin the margin between nuclear war and survival could be. The bomb had not just changed military strategy, it had made the entire human future contingent on the judgment and self-control of a handful of individuals in moments of extreme stress. Beyond geopolitics, the atomic bomb fundamentally reshaped science and its relationship with government, society, and ethics. Before 1945, scientists generally operated within a culture that treated pure research as morally neutral. Knowledge was knowledge. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that comfortable separation became impossible to maintain. The scientists of the Manhattan Project were forced to confront, many of them for the rest of their lives, the direct moral consequences of their work. Oppenheimer himself became a controversial figure, later stripped of his security clearance during the McCarthy era partly due to his opposition to developing the even more powerful hydrogen bomb. Albert Einstein, whose famous 1939 letter to Roosevelt had helped initiate the American bomb program, spent his final years advocating for nuclear disarmament and expressing profound regret about his indirect role. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, founded in 1945 by Manhattan Project researchers, created the iconic Doomsday Clock, a symbolic measure of how close humanity stands to self-annihilation. It has never been reset to midnight, and as of 2024 it stands at 90 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been. The bomb also drove enormous technological advancement that permeated civilian life in ways most people never consider. Nuclear reactors, developed from the same physics that produced the bomb, now generate approximately 10% of the world's electricity. Medical applications of nuclear science, from radiation therapy treating cancer to nuclear imaging techniques like PET scans, save millions of lives every year. The Manhattan Project's massive industrial and scientific mobilization established the template for large-scale government-funded research programs, leading directly to investments that produced everything from the internet to GPS technology. The space race itself was a direct geopolitical offspring of nuclear competition between superpowers, ultimately delivering satellite communications, weather forecasting, and global navigation systems that define modern life. Culturally, the bomb rewired the human imagination in ways still resonating today. The fear of nuclear annihilation produced an entirely new genre of science fiction. Dystopian narratives exploring what comes after civilization's collapse, from novels like On the Beach to films like Dr. Strangelove to the entire post-apocalyptic genre that dominates popular culture today. Godzilla, one of cinema's most enduring monsters, was explicitly created by Japanese filmmakers in 1954 as a metaphor for nuclear destruction. The bomb made the apocalypse a realistic, scientifically credible scenario rather than a religious abstraction, and that shift permanently altered how human beings conceive of their own future and their own fragility. Perhaps most profoundly, the atomic bomb forced humanity to confront a new and deeply uncomfortable truth about itself, that our capacity for technological achievement had outpaced our moral and political wisdom. Civilizations had always been capable of destruction. But the gap between wanting to destroy something and actually having the power to destroy everything, every city, every nation, every living thing, had previously been enormous enough to feel safe. After August 1945, that gap effectively closed. Any serious conflict between nuclear-armed states carries within it the theoretical possibility of human extinction.